Iran's kind of blocking the talks there for a while was kind of a negotiating strategy, and one that I think is frankly not working. I think what it's done is actually narrowed the political space on both sides for an agreement to be reached in a short time. Now, clearly there have been signals in the last days that Iran is prepared to re-engage diplomatically. I hope that's the case. I hope it happens. But again, as you just said earlier, Dan, there's a pretty short fuse here to get something done before the Iranian elections will naturally call for a bit of a reset as that new administration gets organized.
And to your point, you say that the current approach isn't working. What would you be doing differently to try and resolve this crisis?
Well, I think that there has to be what's called a step-by-step approach. We can't have this so-called Alphonse Gaston Act about who goes first. Both sides need to take some significant parallel steps. I think the first step will not be a full restoration of the agreement on either side, but both sides can take some big steps very, very early on to set the stage for succeeding steps. We can't have too many steps in 10 weeks.
Do you think Iran is the biggest security threat facing the region today?
Well, I think Iran's regional activities, which have escalated, certainly are a major challenge to the United States and its friends in the region. For example, I think it's well known, at least it's reported often, that Iran is supplying some of these more precision weapons now to some of its allied proxy groups. That is a very, very volatile situation, whether it's with Saudi Arabia's oil supply chain or whether it's Israel's security, especially with regard to Lebanon and southwest Syria. So these are very volatile developments that I think again need to be reversed if we are going to have increased security in the region.
The former U.S. Energy Secretary Ernest Moniz speaking to me just yesterday. Hadley, this is also interesting to watch, right? Because what we see here is the Biden administration still trying to essentially find its feet in a post-Trump Middle East. We know President Biden promised a quick return to the Iran nuclear deal. So far, he hasn't been able to do that. And one wonders whether perhaps President Biden might have underestimated Iran's hesitancy to come back to the table as quickly as he thought.
Possibly, Dan. I mean, this feels like a bit of a time crunch. You've got the former energy secretary for the Obama team basically saying their time is running out. It requires a step-by-step approach to get that deal. And at the same point, a flurry of diplomatic activity out here in the Gulf Arab countries, aligning themselves, unsurprisingly, with the Israeli hardline stance over any potential agreement with Iran. And all the while, the White House is focused on attending hearings about diplomatic priorities and announcing a meeting with the Chinese. So, okay, Dan, stick with us because our next guest had the chance to speak with Robert Malley, America's envoy to Iran, about that timeline. Barak Ravid is a contributor at Axios, and he joins us now live from Tel Aviv. Barak, it's great to have you on the program. Do you believe that the Biden team is actually up against the wall here in terms of this timeline, or are we going to see a much longer horizon to get a deal?
Well, I think I agree with what Dan said, that basically the Biden team I think underestimated the Iranian position regarding going back to the talks. When I spoke to several senior U.S. officials in recent days, they all say, we weren't surprised. We knew that the Iranians will play tough. They told Trump they refused to meet with him because he didn't remove the sanctions. We expected they will have the same position. But I still think that they thought that the Iranians would move let's say, more quickly towards their direction. And they also say that they think that the Iranians were surprised and disappointed of the slow pace the U.S. is moving in.
No doubt about it. I think it's going to be fascinating to watch all of this play out. I've got a two-part question for you here. How likely is it, do you think, that the Israelis and the Gulf Arab states like Saudi Arabia, like Qatar, like the UAE, are going to have a seat at any table when they're making some kind of a deal here? How likely is that in your view, given the U.S. officials you've been speaking to? And at the same point, I mean, we're talking about the fact that you're saying that they underestimated how difficult it would be to bring Iran back, right? So what is the leverage at this point that the U.S. has?
Well, the U.S. has a lot of leverage because all the sanctions are still in place. I think this is what when you hear what the Iranians are saying, they're basically saying, what's going on? Maximum pressure was a Trump policy. Why is Biden continuing down the same road? And Biden is saying, I can stop this maximum pressure policy once you go back to compliance. So we're still a bit, both sides are still dancing around each other, eyeing each other, trying to find a way to get something going, but it still seems very, very hard. About the region, I think that, Israel would want to see a unified front with the Gulf states, that all of them will come together to the U.S. and tell them, this is our position about the nuclear deal. But, and it's a big but, Israel and the Gulf states are not in the same place when it comes to Iran. Israel's number one priority is the Iranian nuclear program. Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain, other Gulf countries, they're interested mainly in Iran's regional behavior. So it's two totally separate things. And each side has a different priority. And this is why I think it will be more complicated to present this regional unified position to the US than people think.